BookTube, it's Angie. So I have yet another series to start up. I know it seems like I'm just starting all these up, but the idea behind all of these series startups that I'm trying to work out here recently is I have a lot of books that are going to fit into a lot of these different series that I'm starting. So the idea is to make the playlist so that I can have them there and then fill them up. So this new one is the first in what's been done here and there around BookTube, but this is going to be my version of it, which is the videos on the book to movie adaptations. So the first one I'm going to talk about for this series is CoCo Chanel and Igor Stravinsky. This is a historical fiction novel by Greenhalgh, I think is the last name. I wasn't familiar with his work before this book, so I think that's how you say that. But it's a historical novel, but it is based on an actual relationship that happened between CoCo Chanel, the fashion designer, and the composer Igor Stravinsky. This opens in 1913 and in Paris, and CoCo Chanel is a young woman who she's doing her young woman thing. I forget her exact age when the story opens, but I think she's like late teens, early 20s, you know, doing the young woman thing where you're sort of having a lot of flirtations with different men, maybe not serious about any of them, but you're sort of just putting your feelers out as a newly minted adult woman. And she's pretty popular around town. A lot of the guys think she's pretty and has a lot of friends. And then it just starts as one of those evenings where, you know, one of your friends suggests something to do, and it happens with her where one of her friends says, hey, you know, Stravinsky is having a concert in town, do you want to go? And she was basically like, yeah, why not? So she goes, not really expecting anything too much. It's just an evening out, and she's blown away at how taken in she is with his music. She gets an opportunity to meet him after the concert, but it's very casual. They don't get to know each other that well. It's just kind of like a initial introduction, and then, oh hey, liked your work, it's great, love tonight, and then that was pretty much it. And then they don't talk to again for about 7 years. The story kind of breaks off at that point in the novel, and it goes and talks about what she did with her life, what was going on in Stravinsky's life. Then they come together by chance through this mutual friend they have. The friend is having a dinner party in Paris. It's after World War I. A lot of people have lost a lot of loved ones in the war, and everybody is just sort of trying to find their footing again. CoCo Chanel goes to this dinner party, meets with Stravinsky again, and it's funny in the novel because she talks about how she meets him, and there was a line in the book, what was it? It said he had an air of trying too hard to be bohemian, which I guess in her words is kind of like, you know, he was trying to put off what we would probably consider now as sort of like hipsterish vibes. More she's watching him though, she starts to see that maybe there's something underneath all that. Maybe he's posing a little bit, but she gets the feeling that there's something deeper that he's not talking about with anybody, that there's some sort of pain, some sort of loneliness that kind of piques her curiosity. And so she starts talking with him again at this dinner party, and from that dinner party strikes up a friendship, and they start talking back and forth, and she hears about his story of how he and his family, Stravinsky was married and had a slew of kids. She hears the story about how he and his wife and his kids had to flee Russia after the assassination of the Romanov family because they were known as supporters of the Romanovs. And so Stravinsky feared, because he had ties with the royal family, that someone would come after him or his family, and so for safety's sake everybody fled. And they spent a little bit of time in Brittany, in France, in this cramped little apartment. And he said, you know, we're getting by, but Mrs. Stravinsky, she's not loving it. she's really cranky. She's getting really deeply depressed. She has a lot of physical ailments as well. It wasn't a good time with her health declining and Stravinsky trying to escape into his work. There was a sort of divide that was starting up between the Stravinskys. CoCo Chanel, as a friend, at least that's how she poses it. She says, look, I have this estate in the country. Would you like to come stay at my country house? You can stay there with your family, bring the kids, you can work there. I hardly ever use this house. I'll just be in every once in a while, and maybe that will help get your family back on track. And in the beginning, she gives the impression that it's very goodwill of her, that there's no ties to it, but as the reader, you kind of get the sense that she knew what she was doing from the very beginning. And so, of course, her few little times at the country estate start getting more and more, and she and Stravinsky start spending more and more time together. She starts developing more of a romantic interest in him. He has an interest in her, and he likes the idea of the escapism kind of feeling he feels around CoCo Chanel, but there's also that guilt because he is married, but then he also says, but I'm in a miserable marriage right now, so CoCo Chanel, she in this novel, she's talking to her friends and saying, I think I really like him. They do point out in the story that her attachment to Stravinsky was probably a bit muted because CoCo Chanel was famous for never really getting over the unexpected death of her previous lover, Boy Capel, who died in a car accident. She never really got over that, so they kind of work off of that in the novel and say she had an interest in Stravinsky, but it probably never got to the level it could have because she always held on to that grieving for Boy. She's telling her friends, yeah, I like him, but, it does kind of annoy me that he's still married. But then her friends are like, you should go for it, though, because, World War I took out a lot of available men, so we should just be happy with whatever we can get, wherever we can get it. And I don't know, I had a hard time reading that in the novel. I'm open-minded about a lot of things, but I guess when it comes to monogamy and infidelity and those kind of topics, I'm very conservative. It's like I'm very conservative in that, I feel like once you make a commitment to somebody, just make the commitment or don't half-ass it. Just don't be like, oh well, people get hurt, what are you gonna do? Feelings, man. It's like, I don't know, that reading that is hard for me in books sometimes, but that's the opinion of the time. So she goes ahead and starts up this affair, and I just, throughout the whole book, I know Stravinsky's wife, she's kind of written as a bit of a naggy hag and very she's either really morose all the time or she's just on his case, just one or the other. But there's also something to it where you kind of see her struggling, Mrs. Stravinsky struggling, trying to hold on to this person she cares about. She knows that he's slipping away emotionally from her, but she's physically and emotionally has all these hang-ups and doesn't know how to get him back. And it's just like my heart broke for her, and it was hard reading this book because I know it's historical fiction, but it was hard because from a design point of view, I really like the work of CoCo Chanel, but when I've read biographies of her, there's something to her story that makes me feel like there was something a little bit shady about the way she was with people. And maybe that was a misunderstanding with her. I don't know. Obviously she was gone before. But maybe that was something about her that just was misinterpreted by people or came off in a negative way that maybe wasn't quite as negative. But there's just something about when I read about some of her personal relationships that I feel like it just feels like there was I don't know, something shady, something a little bit mean girl in there somewhere. And sort of fed into that, and it was hard. It was hard to read it. As far as the relationship, which was the main basis for this story, the relationship, the way Greenhalgh wrote it, it was just okay for me. It was kind of tame. It was kind of boring. I didn't really love either one of the characters the way they were portrayed or created, the way they came off. Some of their banter got kind of annoying. I know it's supposed to be an impassioned relationship, but like the clinginess kind of burned me out after a while, or just like, oh, you people need to let up. And then it also bugged me that there were scenes where Stravinsky just really needed to get a backbone, and he just wouldn't, between the two women in his life. It felt like he was just trying to spend a lot of time trying to keep everybody appeased, and I was just waiting for him to just be like, stop it! But he wouldn't. So the friendship between them was kind of, it was just alright. The thing I did like about this story is I did like the way that Greenhalgh crafted the images of Chanel's actual life when he worked in bits of the real Chanel's biography. The process she goes through creating the iconic Chanel No. 5 perfume, and the scenes where she's by herself and she's just crafting and coming up with these clothing designs in her head, and she's just in her own workspace. I liked those scenes. I liked the scenes that had her interacting with some of her famous friends and just historical people throughout the story. I forget what I gave this. I think it was just like a 3 or something. It was decent, but I wasn't fully taken in with the book, so I was curious to see what the film was like. So I tried the film, and the film was done, I think the director is French. I could be wrong about that, but the film itself is presented in French. It has English subtitles. I think that if you watch it through the DVD, I think there's probably a way that you can have it read in English to you, but I don't know about you. I always have bad luck with those things. Like whenever you're watching a foreign film and they read it in English, it just sounds really weird and jerky to me. So it's just, to me, it's easier just to read the subtitles. If you're not a foreign film fan, this might be a disregard for you at this point. But yeah, it is in French. The woman who played CoCo Chanel is French. The man that played Igor Stravinsky is Danish, I believe. I liked the film, but it had a few hiccups for me. The film itself opens on the scene that would have been, it opens just a few scenes later than the actual book does, I think. It opens with Chanel going to Stravinsky's concert for the first time. In the book, it doesn't play a huge part in the story, other than it gives a place for Chanel and Stravinsky to meet for the first time. But it's kind of a quick, over and done scene in the book. It's just like, oh yeah, I went to a concert, had a nice time. Yeah, it was great. We should do it again sometime. In the movie, I don't know what the director was thinking, but they decided to do the scene with this weird interpretive dance. And I'm not trying to knock interpretive dance. It was this particular dance struck me as weird. And it went on for over, I watched the timer on my DVD player. It went on for over 15 minutes. Just the dance scene. And there was almost no dialogue in that whole time. And I'm just sitting there going, what is this? Why is this so long? So if that's not really your thing, you may want to fast forward through that part. But if you can get past that part, then the story starts to get really good. So the film itself does take a little bit of patience on the viewer's part. But that being said, I will say that I think the director and the cinematographer, well, like everybody involved really, they nailed the time period and the feeling of Chanel's world when she's, you know, her workspace when she's creating, and I think the woman who played Chanel really got the embodiment of how we perceive Chanel might be on her own time. or how she would have been since she's been passed away for some time now. When you get into that part of the film, that's where you kind of get lost in it, and I did really enjoy that part. But let me say that this movie is about a very intense sexual relationship that happened between Stravinsky and Chanel, or what was rumored to have happened, I guess is the polite way to say it. I don't know if it was as sexual as the movie made it out to be, but there is a lot of sexual content in the film. There was one scene in the movie where they just go at it really hard, and they start having sex on a silk duvet. And this was just like a weird thing with me because I worked in hospitality for so long. That just drove me crazy because I just kept thinking, no, don't be bare-assed on a silk duvet. It's ruined. It looks hot, but yeah, just from my years of cleaning rooms and doing hotel management, I just saw that and I was like, no! It's like when I see rose petals on sheets. It looks really pretty, but my hotel background is like, get those off, they're gonna stain. So yeah, just weird side story. I will recommend though that if you're interested in like behind the scenes kind of movie magic, documentary info, that kind of thing, this one does have a really good behind the scenes documentary that has a lot of really cool information and interviews and footage and stuff, and it's just like some really cool stories in there. And the actor that played Stravinsky is, you know, they do show that he is serious about his role, which was really nice, but they also show him he has this side that's he has a pretty funny sense of humor. They filmed, there was one thing they were talking about where they filmed this young girl. I think she plays one of Stravinsky's daughters in the film, if I'm not mistaken. But they had a behind the scenes interview with her, and they were talking about a scene they were getting ready to film. She wasn't in it because it was a scene between Stravinsky and Chanel. But they asked the little girl, or well, she wasn't like little, but young girl, what was going on, and she's like, oh, well, they're filming a scene right now, and what they're about to do, I dare not say. and then she kind of whispers like, sex in the woods? And then they cut to the guy that played Stravinsky, and he's like, what? And he was talking about the same scene in the script and said, you know, oh, it says something like making love in the woods, and he's like, no, we were fucking. So I thought he was pretty funny. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stories in the behind the scenes footage if you're into that sort of thing. The issue I had with the movie is that it ended in kind of a boring spot. The book actually had a really nice, touching ending. The movie, I don't know, I didn't really love the place they stopped it. But if you're watching the film, keep watching until the end of the credits, because there's an extra scene after all of the credits it's interesting, but it's weird because when you're watching most of the scene, you're like, oh, okay, where is this going? And then you get to what you think is the end of the scene, and you're like, oh, that's actually kind of sweet and touching. And then they do this one little thing that messes it all up and makes it really just, I don't know, it's just confusing, and I felt ultimately unnecessary to have there. So I don't know, maybe that's why they put it at the very end where they figure most people won't see it, but I was like, why would you even shoot that? It didn't make any sense to me when they did that last little thing. But I was just going to close this by saying I was going to recommend you guys watch the short film, I think it's just called Once Upon a Time, that Keira Knightley did with Karl Lagerfeld, where she plays a young CoCo Chanel. It's a really beautifully shot movie. If you're into topics about CoCo Chanel, I would recommend watching that movie. So I'm going to close it here, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.